out a while back. And now that it's out and it's available, streaming live through a lot of different things, Amazon, iTunes, cable companies, satellite. But we have a deluxe edition coming out soon. If you want to hear straight from the scientists themselves about the, let's say, the status of science, this is the film, House of Numbers. Brent, welcome back to the Robert Scott Bell Show.
Thanks so much, Robert. I appreciate it.
Well, Brent, you've been working on a deluxe edition that's going to let loose on the scientists in their own words, completely unedited. What kind of things can we expect to learn?
Well, as National HIV Day AIDS is approaching, I think it's very timely that our deluxe edition is coming out because we have about 6 or 7 featurettes alone on HIV testing where we really deconstruct every aspect of it. Different things that can cause a false positive. What is the gold standard of HIV testing? Has the gold standard been proven? How do you decipher whether a test result is a positive or a negative? It's really earth-shattering information that I think every single person really must see before they consider going in for an HIV test.
Of course, that may be upsetting to the so-called pharmaceutical government complex, which is seemingly more and more willing and wanting to corral everybody into getting these, as I call them, cross-reactive, non-specific, if I can even call them antibody tests. I'm not even sure anymore, Liam.
Yeah, I mean, they're antigen antibody tests. They're synthetic proteins now that are probably grown in bacteria, recombinant proteins and such, and they occur in all sorts of people. They occur in everybody who's got any kind of illness. They occur in all immune diseases. And your question is, what does the FDA want to get? What does the NIH get out of it? I mean, is that it?
Well, that's certainly a big consideration because the motivation to promote it is just with a fervor, like, as I said, it's like a religious cult.
Well, that's a funny thing. Brent has traveled the world looking at this in a way that I haven't. He's been to Africa. Brent, did you go? I don't know where you went. You went to China? You went to...
China, South Africa, Europe, United States, everywhere.
Yeah, I think this has been propagated as a kind of, late 20th century kind of Levitical thing. I mean, if you really want to get analytical and talk about the social underpinnings of it, it rides the same wave of belief as Malthusian economics, where everybody was afraid that the brown-skinned people were going to breed too much. It traces a lot of many historical precedents, and I think that it traces those accurately to that same way this day. So the Clinton Foundation, for example, goes into China, has been building rapid HIV testing centers. Meanwhile, the rapid HIV tests can't be used here, or they get pulled off the market because they give too many so-called they're all false results, but you know what I'm saying. Here they give too many for people's comfort. But in China, it doesn't matter. Why? I guess they're looking for another slave population, very poor people working very rurally in mines, exposed to toxins, coal dust, having TB from all this, to sell drugs to. Lord knows that they make a lot of money doing it. Robert Gallo gets, I think, some 100,000, 150,000 a year. I'll have to look up the exact figure. It's over 100 for having sold this wonky mixture of proteins to Abbott Labs 20-something years ago.
Brent,
that's a big payday for sitting on your duff.
Yeah, Brent, go ahead.
Well, you know what I think is interesting? They've decided they're going to use these rapid tests in poor areas because they feel that HIV prevalence is high there, much higher than the developed world. But when you look at how they come to the estimates of these HIV prevalence, how do we come to estimates to say that South Africa or the African continent is being ravaged by HIV? Is also by using rapid tests or single ELISA tests that they know that can test falsely positive. And based on one person testing positive, it could equate to thousands of people in that region being estimated to have HIV. So we use these non-specific tests because we believe a lot of people there have HIV. But the reason we believe a lot of people have HIV is because of the test that's faulty in the first place.
Yeah, it's a self-fulfilling prophecy, as we talked about, leading people into drugs, pharmaceuticals. Brent, still with me. Liam, in building on what Brent had just said about the tests being, as I say, almost self-fulfilling prophecies. They use faulty tests to confirm the presence of something that builds and it builds and it builds.
Yeah, the tests are built on there's a book called How to Lie with Statistics that should be required reading, but they think only academics read these, so they don't think anybody's going to sort of pierce the veil. But it goes like this. You have a population, and you say the population, a lot of people in the population have AIDS. That is, they have immune deficiency. Drug users, really poor people, a lot of people have immune deficiency. You then take a test that comes up positive for just about any condition of immune deficiency, or plus pregnancy, plus drug use, plus arthritis, plus blah, 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 goes on, plus vaccination. And you give that test, you say, this test in this population that is at risk for immune deficiency, this test is accurate here. But, and this is, in their words, they say if we use this test on a population that is not at risk for immune deficiency, and these are their words, for example, 1,000 white suburban housewives, all positive results will be false, and predictive value of the test, that is how good the test is in being accurate, will plummet to 0. This is mainstream AIDS literature. They say this. If it sounds like a eugenics plot, I don't know. Gosh, it's their language. So they're saying we use the test that we know comes up positive for everything on only the people who we want to get the results for. In other words, if they want you and you walk through their door, they'll get you. Do not go take these tests. Don't do it. They will own you for the rest of your life.
And that life will be rife with pharmaceutical toxins as well. And Brent, you were tested in the film. I want people to see this firsthand, how they talked to you about how they were going to tell whether it was a positive or negative test based on questions you answered in a survey. Now, Brent, as you traveled around the world, was there any one culture that when you got this so-called positive response to a test, that they went holistic, that they rebuilt the immune system, or was everything driving people to these so-called antiretroviral drugs, cocktail drugs, and the like?
No, everything drives you straight to pharmaceutical intervention. And if you follow the literature, it's interesting that they're sort of circling back to what they went away from, which is pumping people with pharmaceutical drugs earlier rather than later, which whether HIV causes AIDS or not, whether HIV exists or not, we know that the drugs are extremely toxic, they're extremely dangerous, and people really need to be armed with information about testing, about drugs, and just this entire issue before they even consider taking a test or consider medicating themselves.
Well, the tests as they are today, I think, are a horrible scam. I mean, and that's an understatement. And I would agree with Liam, and I would call for their banning if I could. And I'm not a guy into banning things, but this is such a scam to drive people into a pharmaceutical decay, inevitable decay, because even if we can acknowledge that toxic drugs can reduce, let's say, the microbial burden in the body temporarily, you might feel better, but ultimately, as it destroys your own cells, it mimics the very thing that they're claiming they're trying to treat and undo.
It's very true that the mainstream drugs do kill all the microbes in your body, including you. In other words, they work. I mean, people who have terrible fungal infections and all this kind of thing will take these drugs, and for a short time they will feel better. Now, then the drugs take them apart, their bone marrow, their liver, etc., and the horrible, horrible disfiguring side effects, and then death. And it can take a little while, but it's just awful. What AIDS critics need to do, which they haven't done, is really start to foment for and present alternative testing-based therapies, natural products. You talk about these things on your show, Robert, but there are many, many things that work that are antimicrobial and antibacterial and antifungal that don't, lay waste to your intestines, and there are ways to rebuild the immune system.
Yes.
That's really got to be on the agenda.
Agreed. That's why we do this every week here on the Robert Scott Bell Show, cover all of these things, including the subject today of the immune deficiency syndrome, for which they want you to test for that which they can't detect, really, and even know what it is, although now we learn the term exosomes here with Liam. We'll talk more about that and be covering more of that on the blog. Brent, how will my listeners and how will everybody get a hold of the expanded edition, deluxe edition of House of Numbers?
If you go to our website, www.houseofnumbers.com, there's a link for the film. Just click on it, and it will take you to it. And you'll get about 9 hours of additional information, quite explosive information from, the horse's mouth, right from their mouth. So I think people will be pretty blown away by the information that's conveyed in the deluxe edition.
Yeah, and I don't exaggerate. This is planet Earth shaking in a good way, bringing people back to their senses and sanity in regards to what they should think about when they are told by big pharma and big government, we're only here to help you. Take this test.